If you keep your cat indoors because you want them to be safe, you're making the right choice for their physical health, aren't you? No cars, no predators, no diseases from other animals, no risk of getting lost. And honestly, every veterinarian will tell you that indoor cats live significantly longer than outdoor cats. But here's the question almost nobody asks, and the one that's going to make you rethink your entire enrichment strategy. What is that completely indoor life doing to your cat's brain? Because while you're protecting their body from physical threats, something else is happening inside their skull that most owners never see, never measure, and never connect to the behavioral problems that start showing up years later. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that research is only now beginning to quantify. Your cat's brain was designed by evolution to process an incredibly complex, ever-changing outdoor environment. Thousands of scents, dozens of prey animals, variable weather, territorial negotiations, vertical climbing, problem-solving for survival. And when you remove all of that, when your cat's entire existence happens within the same 1,200 square feet day after day, year after year, their brain doesn't just stay the same. It changes. Measurably. Physically. In ways that affect cognition, emotional regulation, and behavior. Most indoor cats are experiencing a form of neurological understimulation right now that's creating problems owners interpret as personality quirks or inevitable aging. But these aren't fixed traits. They're the visible symptoms of a brain that's slowly, quietly adapting to an environment that provides a fraction of the input it was built to process. Let me show you what's actually happening inside your indoor cat's brain, because once you understand this, you'll never think about enrichment as optional again. Let's start with what neuroscience tells us about brain development and environmental complexity, because this applies to every mammal, including cats. There's a concept called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and pathways based on experience and environmental demands. And here's the critical part: brains develop complexity in response to environmental complexity. Rich, varied, challenging environments create more neural connections, stronger cognitive function, and better problem-solving abilities. Impoverished, unchanging environments create the opposite. Research on environmental enrichment in animals, published in journals like Nature Neuroscience and Behavioral Brain Research, has consistently shown that animals raised in enriched environments develop measurably different brains than those in barren environments. We're talking about physical, structural differences visible on brain scans, increased gray matter density in certain regions, more dendritic branching in neurons, enhanced synaptic connections. And this isn't just true during development. A landmark study on environmental enrichment in adult animals found that even mature brains continue to respond to environmental complexity, or lack thereof. Your adult cat's brain is still plastic, still changing based on what their environment demands of them. So what does this mean for your indoor cat who experiences the same rooms, the same sounds, the same routine, the same limited stimulation day after day for years? Their brain is adapting to that reduced complexity. And the adaptation isn't neutral, it's a narrowing of cognitive capacity, a reduction in the neural infrastructure that would support problem-solving, learning, and behavioral flexibility. A study specifically on indoor cats and cognitive function found that cats with access to environmental variability and complexity showed better performance on problem-solving tasks and maintained cognitive function better into old age compared to cats in static, unchanging indoor environments. The researchers concluded that environmental monotony doesn't just bore cats, it literally changes how their brain develops and ages. Now let's talk about what this looks like in practice, in behaviors you're seeing right now and probably attributing to something else entirely. When a cat's brain isn't getting the sensory and cognitive input it needs, the deficits show up in specific, measurable ways. First, there's what researchers call learned helplessness or decreased exploratory behavior. Your cat stops investigating new things. A new toy might get a sniff and then they walk away. A cardboard box you put down doesn't trigger the investigation and play it should. Changes in the environment that should spark curiosity instead spark indifference. You might think, my cat just isn't playful. Or, they're not curious by nature. But what you're actually seeing is a brain that's learned that exploration doesn't yield rewarding results, so it stops trying. Research on feline behavior and environmental complexity found that cats in understimulating environments show significantly reduced exploratory behavior over time. It's not personality. It's neurological adaptation to an environment where exploration never reveals anything new or interesting. Second, there's increased anxiety and stress reactivity. This seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't a safe, unchanging environment reduce anxiety? But here's what actually happens. A brain that never has to navigate complexity, solve problems, or adapt to change becomes less resilient to any change at all. Your indoor cat develops a narrow comfort zone, and anything outside it becomes disproportionately stressful. This is why some indoor cats completely fall apart when you move furniture, have guests over, or go to the vet. Their brain hasn't developed the neural pathways for unexpected thing happened, assess and adapt. Instead, it goes straight to threat response because they have no cognitive flexibility to handle deviation from routine. A study on stress responses in indoor versus indoor-outdoor cats found that purely indoor cats showed higher cortisol responses to novel situations, suggesting their nervous systems were less adaptable to change. The researchers noted that lack of environmental variability essentially created cats with rigid, inflexible stress responses. Third, there's cognitive decline that accelerates with age. Just like humans, cats can develop cognitive dysfunction as they age. Memory problems, confusion, altered sleep-wake cycles, behavioral changes. But research shows that environmental enrichment is one of the most protective factors against cognitive aging. A longitudinal study tracking cats over 10 years found that cats in enriched environments maintained cognitive function significantly better than cats in static environments. The difference wasn't subtle. We're talking about cats who remained sharp and engaged at 15 versus cats who showed marked cognitive decline at 12. The variable? How much their environment challenged their brain throughout their life. If you're starting to realize your indoor cat's brain might be suffering from something you never even considered, that's exactly why Whisker Wisdom exists. Subscribe so you understand what your cat's brain actually needs, not just what keeps their body safe. And stay with me, because what comes next is the solution: how to give your indoor cat the neurological stimulation they desperately need without the risks of outdoor access. So here's the question that matters. How do you provide the neurological benefits of outdoor complexity while maintaining indoor safety? Because this isn't an either-or situation. You don't have to choose between your cat's physical safety and their cognitive health. You just need to understand what the outdoor environment actually provides from a brain perspective, and replicate those elements indoors. Element 1: Novel sensory input. The outdoor world is constantly changing, new scents carried on the wind, different animals passing through, seasonal variations, weather changes. Your cat's brain processes all of this as new information that requires attention and categorization. Indoors, you can simulate this through rotating enrichment. Here's what this looks like. Instead of having all your cat's toys available all the time, divide them into 3 or 4 groups and rotate weekly. Every week, your cat encounters new items that their brain has to investigate. Research on novelty and brain function shows that novel objects trigger dopamine release and activate learning pathways that familiar objects don't. Introduce new scents regularly. A paper bag from a new store carries different smells. Safe herbs like cat grass or catnip provide olfactory stimulation. Even bringing in cat-safe branches or leaves from outside gives your cat new scent information to process. One study found that olfactory enrichment alone improved cognitive function in aging cats because it kept the scent processing regions of the brain active. Element 2: Vertical complexity and three-dimensional space. Outdoor cats climb trees, navigate uneven terrain, jump across varying heights. This spatial navigation is cognitively demanding. The brain has to calculate distances, plan routes, maintain balance. It's essentially a full brain workout. Indoors, most cats only use floor space, which is cognitively impoverished. The fix is adding vertical territory, cat trees, wall-mounted shelves at varying heights, window perches, high surfaces they're allowed to access. Research on environmental enrichment consistently finds that vertical space is more enriching than equivalent floor space because it requires more complex motor planning and spatial processing. Create pathways that require problem solving. To get to the highest perch, they need to jump to the mid-level first. This simple complexity keeps the motor cortex and spatial planning regions active. Element 3. Predatory simulation. Outdoor cats hunt, or attempt to hunt, multiple times per day. This activates a huge portion of their brain: visual tracking, motor planning, decision-making, timing, spatial calculation. It's cognitively intensive in exactly the way that builds and maintains neural connections. We've talked about this before at Whisker Wisdom, but it's worth emphasizing here. Structured play that mimics hunting is not optional enrichment. It's neurological maintenance. Research using brain imaging has shown that predatory behavior activates multiple brain regions simultaneously, creating exactly the kind of complex neural activity that maintains brain health. 10 to 15 minutes of proper interactive play daily, where you move a toy-like prey, your cat stalks and chases, and they complete the sequence with a catch, provides cognitive exercise that static toys sitting on the floor never will. Element 4. Problem solving and foraging. Outdoor cats work for their food. They have to locate prey, strategize approach, execute capture. Even feral cats eating from dumpsters have to figure out access, navigate competition, problem solve. Your indoor cat gets kibble in a bowl. There's zero cognitive demand. The solution is puzzle feeders and food-based enrichment. Instead of free feeding from a bowl, make your cat work for food through puzzle toys, hidden food around the house, treat dispensing balls, or DIY enrichment like treats and toilet paper tubes they have to manipulate. Research on cognitive enrichment in cats found that foraging-based feeding significantly improved problem-solving abilities and reduced stress behaviors. The act of figuring out how to access food keeps the prefrontal cortex active and creates a sense of agency, the feeling that actions have consequences and effort produces rewards. Now let's talk about what happens to your cat's emotional regulation centers when they're chronologically understimulated, because this is where behavioral problems originate. The prefrontal cortex, which handles emotional regulation, impulse control, and decision-making, is heavily influenced by environmental complexity. In an enriched environment, your cat's prefrontal cortex is constantly engaged. Should I investigate that sound? Is this safe to approach? What's the best route to that high perch? This constant low-level decision-making keeps the region active and well-developed. In an impoverished environment, there are no decisions to make. Everything is the same. Nothing requires evaluation. And over time, the prefrontal cortex becomes less active, less developed, less capable of the emotional regulation it's supposed to provide. This shows up as behavioral dysregulation that seems to come out of nowhere. Cats who redirect aggression, playing calmly 1 second, attacking violently the next. Cats who can't handle any frustration without explosive reactions. Cats who seem to have zero impulse control around food, attention-seeking, or territorial behavior. Research on impulsivity in cats found that environmental enrichment significantly reduced impulsive and aggressive behaviors, suggesting that the enrichment was actually improving prefrontal cortex function. These weren't bad cats becoming good. These were understimulated brains developing better regulatory capacity. Here's the part that's both heartbreaking and hopeful. The damage isn't permanent. Because of neuroplasticity, enrichment added at any age can create positive brain changes. A study on environmental enrichment introduced to adult and senior cats found measurable improvements in cognitive function and behavior within weeks of implementation. Your 10-year-old indoor cat who's spent a decade in an unchanging environment? Their brain can still respond to complexity. New neural connections can still form. Cognitive function can still improve. It's not too late. But here's what the research also shows: the longer a brain experiences impoverished conditions, the more enrichment is required to reverse the deficits. A cat who's had environmental complexity from kittenhood needs less intensive enrichment to maintain brain health than a cat who's spent years in cognitive deprivation. This is why starting enrichment early matters, but also why starting now, regardless of your cat's age, still matters desperately. So what does a neurologically healthy indoor environment actually look like? Let me give you the practical blueprint based on what we know about feline brain needs. Daily structured play, 10 to 15 minutes minimum, ideally twice daily, using interactive toys that simulate prey movement. This is non-negotiable brain maintenance. Rotating enrichment, change out toys, introduce new safe objects, vary sense weekly. Keep the environment dynamic enough that your cat's brain has to process new information regularly. Vertical complexity, multi-level cat trees, wall shelves, window perches creating three-dimensional territory that requires spatial navigation. Foraging opportunities, puzzle feeders, hidden treats, food dispensing toys that require problem-solving to access resources. Sensory variety, window access to watch outdoor activity, even if they never go out. Visual stimulation matters, safe outdoor sense brought inside, different textures to walk on and interact with. Social complexity if appropriate, for some cats, having another cat provides social cognitive demands. But this only works if both cats are compatible and the relationship is positive. Forced social stress does the opposite of enrichment. Novel challenges regularly, teach new tricks, introduce new types of toys, create obstacle courses, hide and seek games, anything that requires your cat to think, learn, and adapt. Research synthesizing decades of enrichment studies concluded that the key variable is variability itself. It's not about expensive toys or elaborate setups. It's about ensuring your cat's environment presents new information, new challenges, and new opportunities for cognitive engagement regularly enough that their brain stays active. At Whisker Wisdom, we believe indoor cats deserve both safety and a life worth living. If this changed how you think about what your cat's brain actually needs, share it with someone whose indoor cat is bored, anxious, or aging faster than they should be. Your cat's brain is an incredibly complex organ that evolved to process a complex world. When you remove that complexity in the name of safety, you're making a trade-off that most owners don't fully understand. Yes, your cat will live longer indoors. But if those extra years are spent in cognitive decline, emotional dysregulation, and behavioral problems stemming from understimulation, you've protected their body while letting their brain deteriorate. The goal isn't to feel guilty about keeping your cat inside. The goal is to recognize that indoor safety and cognitive health aren't mutually exclusive. You can have both. You just have to be intentional about providing the neurological stimulation your cat's brain is starving for. That toy rotation you've been meaning to implement? That's brain health. The cat tree you've been considering? That's cognitive maintenance. Those 10 minutes of play you keep skipping? That's neuroprotection. Your cat's brain is changing every single day based on what their environment demands of it. The question is whether it's growing connections or losing them. Whether it's building resilience or rigidity. Whether it's staying sharp or slowly dimming. And all of that is within your control. Not through expensive interventions or complicated protocols. Just through understanding what a brain needs to stay healthy and providing it consistently. Your indoor cat can live a long, safe life with a brain that stays active, flexible, and healthy until their final years. But only if you give that brain the complexity it was designed to process. Starting today. Starting with one change that adds variability, challenge, or novelty to their world. Because your cat's body is safe inside. Now it's time to make sure their brain is thriving there too.